getting some breaking news. That's why cutting out of that press conference by Atashi. Now, Russia seems to have apprehended a terrorist who was planning to travel to India to commit a high-profile terrorist attack. This was a planned terrorist attack against what they are calling one of the high representatives of the ruling circles of India. This is a massive claim, a big one there being made. Russia seemed to have apprehended this terrorist. He, in fact, allegedly was planning to travel to India to commit what they are calling a high-profile terrorist act, and they are also saying that this was against one of the high reps of the ruling circles of the country. Abhishek Jha, my colleague, is joining me on the broadcast for this big breaking development that we are tracking on CNN News 18. Abhishek, what more details do you have? This is a big revelation that's coming to light.
Yes, today morning only Russian agencies, federal agencies have declared that one person who has apparently expressed his allegiance with ISIS and who was recruited in Turkey, he was supposed to carry out a major terrorist attack on some ruling elite in India. It is believed that the person who has been apprehended has been trained as a suicide bomber, and the modus operandi seems to be that he had to fly to Russia, get his all documents in place, and then from Russia he was supposed to come to India and where he was supposed to do that terrorist activities. But in due time, he has been apprehended by the Russian agencies, and this is reported by Russian news agency Riva Novosti that the person has been very well arrested. Not been divulged by these right, but we can assume that in federal agencies of Russia, they have arrested a person who has expressed his allegiance with ISIS, and he was about to conduct a major terrorist strike in India and to some high-profile target individuals. Then probably that situation has been averted. We'll also have to see how the Indian agency will get in touch with the Russian agencies, because it looks like the target, though the terrorists had been apprehended in Russia, in Moscow, but the target was very well of India. We know that just recently, like last week only, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was in Moscow, where he had also met the Russian National Security Advisor Patrushev, and both had talked about the regional and global issues of security. And we know that India has always expressed its security concerns, especially in the wake of fallout of Afghanistan and the harboring of terrorists and the linkages that Afghanistan have, the past linkages that Afghanistan's current ruling dispensation has with various other terrorist organizations. And it has always expressed its apprehension that those networks can very well reignite itself, and they can be a very a worrisome situation for India. And when Mr. Doval was with his Russian counterpart, they did talk about the emanating threats from all the issues of the recent events that happened in the neighborhood.
Right. Abhishek, I'd also like to understand, now that Russia has detained the suicide bomber, what is the next step that is going to actually happen from the Indian authorities? What goes on from here on? Because this is a big development, and if at all the target was a ruling elite in the country, this is massive.
It looks like the very initial information that is actually coming out has been that the person has been nabbed in Moscow, and in the initial probing, it has been revealed that his target was not Russia. Russia was just a pathway for him, and he was supposed to come to India with all the documents that were about to be furnished in Russia, and probably that was to cover his trail and to be less suspectful by the Indian agencies, because he was coming from Russia, and there has not been any established link of people traveling through Russia and coming to India and conducting any major terrorist strike. So probably this was the safest route that the person could have chosen, and he had chosen this. Thankfully, it looks like that in due time, Russian agency has been able to apprehend this person, and this major strike has been averted. We have to see whether the Russian agencies have still contacted the Indian counterparts, or the Indian counterparts or the Indian security agencies are in touch with Russia. More details on this issue will be coming up in the next few hours.
All right, Abhishek, thank you so much for joining us. This is a big development that we are attributing to sources from the Russian authorities, where Russian authorities seem to have apprehended terrorists whose plot was to target one of the high-profile executives in India. And the trail that he took was from Turkey to Russia, and that's where the suicide bomber was apprehended. I'm also now joined on the broadcast by Mr. Pathikrit Payne, who's a security analyst. Also joining me is Mr. A.K. Sivash, who is a defense expert. Mr. Pathikrit, I'll come to you first. Your first reactions on this big breaking news input that we are getting on CNN News 18. This is a high security risk that we're talking about over here.
Well, I think it's a very, very alarming situation, and I think I congratulate the Russian agencies for arresting the person. I think the reason why the Russians have been able to arrest this person, who is supposed to be somebody of Central Asian origin, is because in the entire spectrum of Central Asia, Russia continues to have major, intelligence influence in terms of its own people being present over there for intelligence gathering, and that's one of the reasons. And
okay.
Islamic State continues to be a major threat, not just for India but also for Russia, especially because one of the prime reason for which Islamic State was destroyed in Syria was the Russian influence and the Russian intervention in that place. Islamic State's entire modus operandi after they're being defeated in Syria has been to send its cadre back to their home state and asking them to do jihad in those places. But it's generally been people of their own country doing it over there. It's a new kind of a development where somebody of a Central Asian origin trying to come to India to do an attack, which is a new trend altogether. And if it is so, then it's a very, very dangerous situation. I think there is a growing synergy between Russia and India in terms of anti-terrorism intelligence sharing, as well as working on lines in making sure that the countries protect each other, especially because during the Ukraine crisis, India has stood strongly and firmly by Russia. So I think it only shows the level of threat that India's political leadership is right now facing from terrorist organizations, and it's all the more reason to be far more careful about it. So it also vindicates that the threat of terrorism which is emanating or coming to India is not just from Pakistan alone, but it is across the spectrum of Central Asia, where the IS influence is actually making some of the elements think of coming to India and do something devastating act. We have to be far more careful when it comes to internal security, which is becoming a major headache now, much more than a conventional wars possibility.
Right. All right. Major General Sivash, I'd like to bring you in over here. Do you think this was an advantage that India got because of the route that this particular suicide bomber decided to take? Remember, he has allegiance, or swore his allegiance to ISIS. So now that he's been nabbed in Russia, and because, like Pathikrit was mentioning, that Russian intelligence in Central Asia is really good, because of which they were